So thanks everyone for being here. I'm Abhay Kumar. I'm the CEO of the Helium Foundation. And I wanted to do a little bit of an introduction about what Helium is, what DPINs are, what decentralized wireless is in general, and start from there. So Helium is started off as a decentralized wireless network back in 2019. We started off specifically focused on IoT. And our goal here was to try to get more coverage to more places so that when you build a sensor application, you have access wherever you are. You don't need to go specifically configure for the region that you're in. We started off as a typical Web 2 project. It was a sensor stack, a gateway, and a protocol. And we realized that once you left a particular area, you no longer had access to backhaul, to be able to connect your sensor application. So we came up with this novel way of incentivizing folks to provide coverage. And since then, we sort of became the largest DPIN, and that was a term that was sort of made up after we started. And I work at the Helium Foundation. I started off as a developer in the ecosystem. I deployed a hotspot. I started building applications, and over time, I joined the core team and eventually became the head of the foundation. The foundation works on a variety of things. We work on the protocol, so the core crypto primitives that the Helium network is built on top of. We work on governance, and we also work on community management, education, things like that. So that's where we're coming from. I wanted to give a little bit of an overview of DPINs in general. And this is the rough landscape of what some folks out there. This is a slide by IoTex. They sort of provide an update of all the different kinds of things that have cropped up in the many years. You can see us in the sort of wireless side of things, and there's lots of projects in here that I'm sure there are folks in the ecosystem that I'll talk about. But I think it's important to say what a DPIN is. So DPINs are physical infrastructure networks. These networks, generally align token incentives to align all the participants in the network. This is everyone from the supply, demand, investor, like sort of all the different sort of parts of this ecosystem that need to build these incredibly large networks. And they, on the supply side, they use tokenomics to sort of bootstrap this network, right? So they're attempting to solve this typical cold start problem that you have when you're building a marketplace. Here, I'm just going to do this. And on the demand side, they tap into the latent supply, latent demand that's out there, and allows end users and platforms to pay suppliers directly. It solves that sort of micropayments problem. When you're building a sensor application, you might only really need it for a very short period of time, and you need to be able to pay a variety of users. Potentially thousands of hotspot owners that you might be using when your package travels from where I live in California all the way to New York. So DPIN sort of solves both sides of this, the demand and the supply side. And some of these DPINs have developed, and they're just sort of forked off as sort of other kinds of applications. The definition matters a little bit. There are these virtual products out there as well, and there's now a new term for these. They're called DVINs, decentralized virtual infrastructure networks. And I think they're relevant, and I think what's important about DPINs is that they're sort of a physical piece of hardware and sort of physical interactions in a particular area, and that's sort of what separates these two different kinds of protocols. I will say, DPINs don't necessarily apply to all infrastructure. A generic compute platform or a generic proof of work protocol doesn't necessarily mean that it's a DPIN. I'd argue that Bitcoin is definitely not a DPIN, although maybe you can argue that a mining pool might be. And so let's talk about why DPIN as a sort of way of building this kind of infrastructure works for wireless. And so, let's think about the traditional telco. Traditional telcos are, enormous operations. You need to do everything from acquiring real estate to building towers to sort of building on top of those towers and sort of maybe renting out space in those towers. Putting up hardware on those towers, paying for the backhaul to those towers, and then paying for that ongoing maintenance of infrastructure there. And then you have to go acquire customers, bill, and you have to deal with billing across the stack, right? Everything from being able to pay the folks that are providing that infrastructure all the way to actually getting your customers to pay you. And these are sort of enormous, enormous companies that have been built over the years. And if you think about like a traditional telco like Verizon in the United States, they're spending hundreds of billions of dollars a year on building and creating this infrastructure. And what happens is often the areas that these infrastructure networks are built may not be aligned with where the demand is. And so that's one of the approaches of using a DPIN here. And these costs are going to continue to increase over time. As there are more bandwidth, higher bandwidth applications that are out there, we sort of demand high bandwidth, low latency applications at the edge. We might be in a shopping mall or a movie theater or maybe outside the movie theater, hopefully, and we're on our phones. And we want to have access to sort of high quality content online. And you can't really defeat physics. If you want a high bandwidth, low latency connection, you probably need to be pretty close to where that tower is, just by the nature of physics. And until we can figure that part out, that's probably the next multi-trillion-dollar product if you could figure that out. So you really can't do that. And so what Helium does, it sort of aligns incentives. You install a hotspot that looks like this. These are mobile hotspots. They broadcast Wi-Fi, and you allow anyone to be able to deploy these things where the customers are, where there is demand. And what we ended up building over the last several years is a sort of novel proof of work system that sort of incentivizes folks to put these up. They provide backhaul. And anytime there's data that transfers over this, you get paid. And so over the last week or so, just in the last week or so, we've seen that there's over 7 terabytes a day going over about 9,000 hotspots that are deployed in the United States, and that scales over time. And so, why does this really work? It's really about creating this simplified experience. Anyone can deploy this hotspot. You buy a piece of hardware, you connect it. That's the Helium Wallet app. It's a very simple application that allows you to onboard these particular things. And over the last several years, the IoT network's been around since 2019. We've seen hundreds of thousands of hotspots deployed, and right now there's around 450,000 active, roughly, depending on the day. And as I mentioned, on the mobile side, there's over 9,000 that are deployed. And these are very normal people, right? These are folks who, like, one great example is like my mom and my aunt can run one of these in their house, right? They have this app, they download this app, they pair it to a device that they receive in the mail, and they can plug it in on a window, or if they're very ambitious, like a lot of folks in our community are, they put it on top of roofs in their houses. And this kind of accessibility is really how these networks can grow very, very quickly. As I mentioned, launched in 2019, hundreds of thousands of these deployed all over the world. And the way we do this is through token incentives. Since anyone can deploy these things, each one of these networks are able to offer a token, right? So the mobile network offers a mobile token, and the IoT network offers an IoT token. And each of these tokens are pretty independent. So for the mobile network, you earn these tokens for doing everything from deploying hardware, for being a subscriber, like by verifying. And then this is kind of an interesting model here, where it actually allows any of us to have a SIM card on our phone, and by the nature of walking around and verifying coverage, we're actually providing value to the network. We're doing work for the network, and so the network pays us. On the IoT side, you're providing coverage, and you're creating these like incredible installations that are able to cover thousands of meters, just to be able to provide a small little sensor that's just driving through just for a few minutes, enough coverage to report back and say where it is. And that's really the power of these kinds of networks, using these kinds of token incentives. And so this is roughly what the IoT network looks like, give or take, with places all over the world, primarily focused in the US and Europe, where we started, but starting to see a lot of coverage. I'm most excited about, just a couple of months ago, we started generalizing and supporting a single standard in Africa. And I think I really hope to see this expanding there over the next couple of months. And we have some incredible folks building on top of this network. So this is a particle device that was announced just a couple of weeks ago. And this is a device that a developer can use. And they don't really need to think about the backhaul. This thing supports Wi-Fi, cellular, Helium over LoRaWAN, and then also satellite. And all these networks are not really something that an end developer really wants to think about when they're deploying their sensor application. They're really thinking about, like, I just want to build an application and then iterate on that information, right? And so Particle is able to provide this service as an IoT platform for all of their potential developers. And the kinds of applications are pretty wide-ranging. So this is a cool thing that happened just a couple of weeks ago. It was announced by a company called Green Metrics. And Green Metrics is helping track a endangered species, an endangered cat, the lynx. And the sort of action that we see here, which is pretty incredible, is they are able to see that there's a lynx near a road, identified with a camera. That camera sends that information over the Helium network back to their servers, and the servers push back into Waze, a driving application, that sort of alerts drivers that there's an endangered species on the road, right? This helps protect the population, the sort of native population of these areas with a single application over this incredibly ubiquitous and very affordable network, the IoT network. And so these are the kinds of things that we're seeing built. This is pretty organic, and because of the size of the network and the scale of the network, we're seeing folks tell us about it after they build, which is really incredible as a builder of a platform. These aren't things that our team really knows about until the end. And so let's talk a little bit quickly about mobile. So the mobile network, as I mentioned, deployed it initially in the United States. We're starting to see pilots in Mexico, and this network is created again by the community, and we're able to build some incredible products like Helium Mobile. Helium Mobile is another company in our ecosystem, and what they do is they offer a typical cellular service. I have it on my cell phone, and this cellular service is $20 a month, unlimited, for anyone in the United States. And the way this works is where there is a Helium hotspot, it will use it preferentially for data. And where there isn't, it'll fall back to the T-Mobile network. So it is a hybrid carrier. So what's amazing about that is that you're able to offer incredible service and a very, very sort of affordable service to anyone in the country because of this community-built network, because of this network that's accessible to anyone. And they're able to do things like offer mapping. And this is something that's built into the protocol. And as I mentioned, you as a subscriber, or anyone as a subscriber, can map the network, provide more information about where there is coverage and where there isn't. And they're able to offer token rewards. And you can use those token rewards to maybe pay for your service. There are folks out there that are effectively paying for their service entirely by mapping and by spending a few minutes a day just walking around their neighborhood. And we've seen the growth. In the back is a map of, I believe that's Hawaii. Or no, that's actually Miami. And so we've seen over the last few months a growth of over 80,000 unique subscribers on the network. And this is just over a few months. And I think it's important to just provide one highlight slide at the end here about what the different kinds of things that are enabled by this. And you'll hear from Demo in a little bit, but the Demo network uses the Helium network for coverage. HiveMapper uses the Helium network for coverage. And these stats are a little old now. That monthly active wallets is over 90,000, almost 100. Total active wallets is over 250K now. And wallets using other Solana ecosystem projects is in the last few months spiked quite a bit to about 90,000. There's a lot of folks interacting with other parts of Solana as there's more composability. But how did the average user think about Helium? The average user thinks about cell phone service and tracking something, like maybe their pet. And this is what we've been able to create over the last several years in Helium, and we think that this is an interesting model to build other infrastructure products. So that's about as much time as I have. That was pretty quick. I'd love to chat with anyone else after the talk or anytime today. But if you'd like to reach out or follow Helium, the QR code on the left will give you some information there. And then if you want to listen to me talking about decentralized systems and decentralized wireless, I'm on the right. Thank you so much.